Based out of Texas. Yeah. We have them in Ellington all the time. Too bad we couldn't bring Fifi over. B-29.
Aircraft to take off, so how much do I owe you?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? You're about to meet the voice of North America's greatest aerial events, the recipient of the coveted International Council of Airshow Sword of Excellence, and your MC for today's air show. Let's welcome Rob Ryder.
Well, hi, Pensacola. Y'all ready for an air show? Let me try that again. Y'all ready for an air show? I hope you've liked what you've seen so far, because we're going to continue to crank it up on this beautiful day, this Veterans Day, when we honor the men and women who have served our country. This November 11th of 2011, also the 100th anniversary of naval aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a world-class air show, I promise you. It just doesn't get any better than this. You're about to see the Emerald Coast skydiving. Coming up is Captain Joe Fagundes, a guy who in 1962 earned his wings right here at NAS Pensacola.
Where is this Texan? It's supposed to be flying. Oh, it's over
Joe Fagundes in the Texan directly in front of us and high overhead. Was given the Wright Brothers Award for 50 years of accident-free, totally safe flying. Very few people have received that award, and he deserves a big round of applause for that. The Yellow Peril. Known as officially as the N2S, just passed us in the blue and yellow version, the U.S. Army Air Force version, the PT-17, both the Stearman. Just overhead and to the right, the North American T-28 Trojan. That's flown by Captain John Serrato. It's the first C-model Trojan ever built. It was designed for carrier operation. Of the three models of the Trojan that were most common, the A model was for the Air Force, the B and C models were for the Navy. Working their way down in altitude now. We have an F4U Corsair. I believe that's an F8F Bearcat in trail. And again, right in front of us, the N2S. The Stearman, the primary trainer used by the United States Navy and the Army Air Force. The T-28 Trojan right overhead was powered by a 1,425 horsepower engine, 9-cylinder radial. The original Air Force version had an 800 horsepower motor on it. The Navy needed more power. The B model was used as the Air Force was using it as a transitional trainer for getting pilots into jet aircraft. And then when they decided they needed to put it in as a carrier qualification trainer, they modified it. They put a tail hook on it. And they shortened the size of the propeller, the length of the propeller blades to keep those propeller blades from hitting the deck of the aircraft carrier on those very punishing landings. And the T-28 that we see was the first ever. Here again, Joe Fagundes. Flown everything from the North American Texan to Boeing 747s. Overhead, the Corsair and the Bearcat, representing some of the highest performance aircraft in the naval inventory in World War II. Behind it, the Curtiss SB2C Helldiver. Of the 7,000 Helldivers that were built, that is the only one remaining flying today. Listen to the sound of that T-28 as it comes by. You hear about half the exhaust for the cylinders, and so it has a very, very different kind of sound as it goes by. Coming up next, an aircraft known as the COD, the C-1A Trader, being flown today by Henry Hughes. It was the carrier onboard delivery version of the aircraft. It was known as the S2 Tracker. It's got 2 Wright engines on it that generate about 1,425 horsepower each. Only 83 of these airplanes were built. 62 have been, let's see, I think they were retired in 1962. And that, ladies and gentlemen, the one that just went by with a twin engine, the only C-1A in the world. And the Stearmans give them away. Kerry Harden and Bill Austin. Bill Austin came all the way from Concord, California to be with us here. Kerry Harden from Starkville, Mississippi is also a guy who has gotten into the coffee business and has what a blend called Stearman coffee. And I tell you what, it's tasty. There is the T-28 Trojan going by again. The first C model, the first one that was built for carrier operation of all of the Trojans that were built by by North American Aviation. Here comes Henry Hughes again. And the only flying trader in the world. Nicknamed the COD, it's short for Carrier Onboard Delivery. Mistake on this one. It's possible that Ed Vesley is actually flying that Navy SNJ. He's also one of the guys that flies the Curtiss Helldiver that we'll see coming in here in just a little bit. It's a very, very big aircraft, but remarkably easy to fly. Very light stick forces to get it to roll. Even though it's bigger than, even though it's larger than its older cousin, the T6 or the SNJ, the Texan, it rolls much, much easier. recover some of the aircraft and step them down. What you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is a wonderful coordination effort by the premier air boss in our industry. He is Wayne Boggs, and I hope you'll give the man who keeps the airplanes apart and the show together a nice round of applause. He sometimes handles 70 and 80 aircraft at a time over Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and over Lakeland, Florida, at the big fly-ins there that we have every spring and every summer. And Wayne is here as the air boss. It's his third year here, and he's doing a great job coordinating it. He is, if that name sounds familiar, he is the brother of Baseball Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. Wayne's here, a former Marine. He helped celebrate yesterday's 236th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps, and is a proud veteran indeed. Diving in now, we've got the fighters. I want you to look, and I'm going to turn the music down, give you a chance to hear the round 2,000 horsepower engine of the Vought F4U Corsair and the Grumman F8F Bearcat. Of 7,000 Curtiss Helldivers built, the only flying Helldiver in the world. And the Douglas Dauntless. The bent wing bird and the whistling death, and you actually heard a little bit of a whistle there, but when it was used in the Pacific theater as an attack aircraft, the Japanese referred to it as the whistling death because of the noise that it made when it was doing the ground attack. Is in markings of the United States Navy's Blue Angels. It was the second type of aircraft flown by the Navy. The big tail beast is what they called the Curtiss Helldiver. That's the Douglas SBD Dauntless. Despite its size, the SB2C was much faster than the SBD it replaced. And the Dauntless was powered by a 1,200 horsepower Wright radial engine. Air-cooled, like all of these round engines were, like most aircraft engines were of the time. Here's the photo pass from the Corsair. Look at this. The F4U Corsair was very well known back from 1976 to 1978 as the star of a television show which chronicled the exploits of the Black Ships built by Grumman. It was part of a very, very long line of Cat aircraft. Nicknamed Cat aircraft. The Wildcat, the F4F Wildcat, the F6F Hellcat, the F7F Tiger Cat, the F8F Bearcat, and even the F14 Tomcat. The F-14 Tomcat served with the Navy for over 30 years and was retired on September 22nd of 2006. The Tomcat sunset. But that Corsair, it was a remarkable performer as both a carrier-borne aircraft and also a ground attack. Dauntless, the lady in blue, as they call it. If you turned on your television back in 1976 to 78, you might hear something like this when you wanted to hear about the Black Sheep Squadron and the exploits of their leader, then Colonel Pappy Boyington.
A poor little lamb who had lost our way.
They used 4 or 5 of the Corsairs in that show. At the time, they were owned by a guy named Howard Pardue, and then many have since been sold, and one of them now is up in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, at the Tri-State Warbird Museum, where it's being totally restored and brought to flying condition again. With a top speed of over 420 miles per hour, depending on the version of the aircraft that was built, the F4U Corsair was able to outclass anything the Japanese had. 12,571 Corsairs were built, most of them by chance bought, others by the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, the FG1, and the Brewster Aircraft Company, Brewster Aeronautical. They were known as the F3.
Now the cold was just next week.
There's the F8F Bearcat touching down. We'll see it fly a little bit later on today with an aerobatic routine. Touching down, or getting ready to touch down right now. Almost down is that the big-tailed beast, the Curtiss Helldiver. The Bearcat, that you see coming off the runway right now, was also a very, very fast performer at the National Air Races in Cleveland back at the turn, back in about 1948, 1949. It did not actually serve in World War II. It came in too late for that. All right, as we get the Helldiver down, look off to the left. We got the SBD, the Dauntless, on its way in.
I'm outside right now.
Oh boy, looks like we've got an attack going on. 2 aircraft now pouncing on that Dauntless that is on short final. First, the Nakamichi A6M Zero. At the beginning of the war, it was thought by Western military planners that Japan could not produce. Such was not the case. Behind that, the Kate torpedo bomber. Those 2 Japanese-marked aircraft were 2 of the 3 types that attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. The day referred to as then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a day that would live in infamy. A day later, the United States joined World War II with the Allies against Japan. It was 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. that aircraft from the Imperial Japanese Navy attacked Pearl Harbor. Now take a look as we recreate something that actually happened. The first aircraft to shoot down a Japanese Zero in World War II was the Dauntless that you see here right behind it. It's the Japanese pop smoke indicating that he has been hit. Piloting the Dauntless today is Commander, we call him Big Al, Commander Alan Armstrong. Another Alan Armstrong is flying the Kate, along with Tony Stein, the two members aboard the Japanese Kate. Flying the Zero, Jack Van Ness. Flying the Helldiver earlier today is Mark Allen. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero that we see here today, probably best described as a movie star. The Zero, that we'll see in just a moment coming by. Here comes the Kate right now. The Zero owes her existence to 20th Century Fox. In 1968, when they produced the movie Tora Tora Tora, they needed aircraft to look like Japanese fighter and torpedo and dive bomber aircraft. And so for about $20,000 per airplane, North American Texan and Vultee Valiant aircraft were highly modified. Here comes the Zero right now to look like the Japanese Zero, but that aircraft is actually a North American Texan with a modified canopy and cowling and other modifications, including obviously the paint job to make it look like a Japanese Zero. The airplane, the Zero, was so amazingly potent and nimble. With an 1130 horsepower engine, it could still travel at speeds of about 350 miles per hour. It was superior to anything in the United States inventory and perhaps the world. The Japanese Empire thought that they were invincible, and early in the war they were pounding the United States at every turn. They thought they could control the entire Pacific with their air superiority. Over 10,000 Zeros were produced. But their losses in the war and the requirement included in the Japanese surrender agreement signed in August of 1945 said that all of Japan's offensive weapons had to be destroyed. And so no authentic Japanese Zeros were actually used in the production of Tora Tora Tora. Getting them ready for a photo is ready as we see a couple of movie stars here. The Zero being the movie star. The Dauntless helped turn the tide of the war in World War II at the Battle of Midway on June 4th of 1942. The Dauntless sunk 4 major aircraft carriers of the Japanese Navy, ceasing Japanese expansion in the Pacific. The SBD was also in service with 20 U.S. Marine Corps squadrons, and many Dauntlesses were retrofitted with the Westinghouse ASB radar, the first to be used by the United States Navy. It was the first American combat aircraft to shoot down a Japanese Zero fighter. The SBD was the only U.S. combat aircraft to fight from the beginning of the war until the end. Considered to be the most destructive air weapon of the U.S. Navy, the SBD sank over 300,000 tons of enemy ships, a greater tonnage of Japanese shipping than any other Allied aircraft during the war. 18 of those ships were warships, including 5 aircraft carriers sunk in the Battle of the Coral Sea and at Midway. It earned the nickname Slow but Deadly, SBD, but after the war, the Marine Corps continued to use the SBD. The SBD you see flying today, this Dauntless, has been a movie star as well. You can watch the film Midway or rent the blockbuster miniseries The Winds of War and its sequel, War and Remembrance. This is the Kate. Flown today by Alan Armstrong and Tony Stein. These airplanes are from the Commemorative Air Force, from the Dixie Wing and the West Texas Wing of the Commemorative Air Force. It is the goal and mission of the Commemorative Air Force to keep in flying condition as many aircraft as possible for aircraft that have bought our freedom and in some cases fought against us. We'll see them come into land, and in just a few moments we're going to turn things over to the United States Air Force's A-10 East Coast demonstration. From all across the country, and the tens of thousands of people from all around the world who have a passion for flight. We've got forums about your favorite air show performers, your favorite jet teams, of course the Blue Angels, and we've got films there that you can see, many of them depicting great historical moments in aviation's history of over 100 years of powered flight. We are actually coming up on the 108th anniversary of the Wright brothers' world-changing first powered flight that took place on December 17th of 1903 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on Kill Devil Hill, when Wilbur and Orville Wright, 2 bicycle shop owners and manufacturers from Dayton, Ohio, and 2 very, very brilliant aeronautical engineers were able to, in 120 feet and 12 seconds of flight, change the world. We'll recover a couple of airplanes. Then we're going to bring the F4U Corsair back in. David Falk is going to be flying an aerobatic demonstration with the F4U Corsair. We'll tell you a lot more about it. The movie star is coming back in right now. The original Japanese Zero was very light, very nimble, very fast, but it did have one Achilles heel. One huge shortcoming in the Japanese desire to keep this airplane very light. It did not have much armor in it. And so if another airplane could get on the 6 o'clock or in a firing position on a Japanese Zero, the pilot was really in a very vulnerable position with no steel behind him to help prevent him from getting hit by the bullets.